The sound of soft chimes echoed through the room, the alien equivalent of a doorbell. Jack ignored it. He was in bed, groaning into his pillow, when something cold brushed his leg. With a start, he sat up. A figure loomed at the foot of his bed, tall, sleek, with shimmering skin that reflected the faint ambient light. Four arms, glowing faintly blue at the tips, reached out. "Human," the figure said. "I require immediate biothermal resonance." Jack blinked. "What?" The alien woman stepped closer, her long legs moving fluidly. She crawled onto the mattress, her glowing fingers curling around his blanket like they owned it. "Biothermal resonance. It is essential for my survival. Do not resist." "Resist?" Jack yanked the blanket up to his chest like a teenager caught sneaking a cigarette. "Lady, I don't know who you are, but I'm pretty sure you've got the wrong guy." "I am Valara of the Zelthari delegation," she said, her voice smooth but firm. "Your body heat and proximity are adequate for my needs." Jack squinted at her. "Body heat? Are you trying to tell me you're cold?" "It is not about cold," Valara said, as though explaining something to a particularly slow child. "The parasite thrives in isolation. Physical contact with a compatible host disrupts its ability to reproduce. Without this, I will perish." "Parasite? What parasite?" Jack's voice climbed an octave. She tilted her head, her four eyes glinting with something close to amusement. "It is invisible to human senses. Your scanners are too primitive to detect it. But it is here, and it is lethal." Jack rubbed his temples. This had to be a dream. "Look, Valara, I've had a long day, and the last thing I need is some alien telling me I'm her human space heater. Can't you, I don't know, resonate with one of your own people? Zelthari biology does not allow for such resonance within the same species. Only humans possess the required frequency." Jack stared. "You're making this up." Her expression didn't change, though her lower set of arms crossed. "Do you wish to test the theory by allowing me to die?" His mouth opened, closed, then opened again. Wow. That's manipulative. You're good at this." Valara said nothing, instead maneuvering herself under the blanket with unnerving efficiency. Jack recoiled as one of her glowing tentacles, no, arms, coiled around his torso. "Whoa, whoa, whoa! Personal space. Personal space is irrelevant. Your compliance ensures my survival." Jack groaned. "This is not how I thought my diplomatic assignment would go. Do you even know how awkward this is?" "I am aware that humans possess heightened sensitivity to proximity," Valara said. "Your social constructs are peculiar." "Peculiar? Lady, this is beyond peculiar. You're practically spooning me. I do not understand your idiom." Jack flopped back onto the pillow, glaring at the ceiling. "Of course, you don't." For a moment, there was silence, broken only by the hum of the ship's ventilation system. Then, "You are warm," Valara said. "Yeah, well, humans run hot. Evolution or something. Don't make it weird. I assure you, this is entirely clinical." "Sure it is." Jack turned his head to look at her, half expecting a smirk. Instead, she stared at him with the serene intensity of someone completely oblivious to sarcasm. He sighed. "How long does this resonance thing take?" "Until the parasite is neutralized." "And how long is that?" "It varies." Jack groaned again. "Fantastic. Just, don't snore, okay?" "I do not snore." "Lucky you," he muttered. As the room settled into a tense silence, Jack tried to focus on anything but the alien draped against him. Her skin was cool, but not unpleasantly so, and she didn't seem to have a pulse in the traditional sense. Was she even breathing? He decided he didn't want to know. "Do humans always complain this much?" Valara asked suddenly. Jack rolled his eyes. "Only when aliens invade their personal space. This is not an invasion. It is survival." "Yeah, Keep telling yourself that. Another pause. Then, in a softer tone, she said, "You have my gratitude, human." This is not an easy request to make. For the first time, Jack detected a hint of vulnerability in her voice. He shifted uncomfortably. "Yeah, well, you're welcome, I guess. Just try not to drool on me, okay?" "I do not drool." "Of course, you don't." As the tension ebbed, Jack allowed his eyes to close. The last thing he heard before sleep claimed him was Valara's quiet voice. "Your body heat is adequate." Jack woke up to the smell of something burning. Not like someone's cooking breakfast burning, but more like someone's cooking something that should never be cooked. He opened his eyes and saw the mess in his kitchenette. Valara stood by the counter, her 4 arms working in perfect synchronization, each one handling a different alien cooking instrument. There were strange glowing objects bubbling in a cauldron-like contraption, and the whole place smelled like a cross between burnt rubber and something radioactive. "Ah, Valara?" Jack groaned, rubbing his eyes. "What is that?" "It is a human delicacy," she said, turning with a bright smile. "I have combined your spices and my knowledge of intergalactic cuisine. It should be adequate for your palate." Jack stared at the concoction, now oozing from its pot. "Yeah, that's one way to describe it. I am aware humans require high-energy sustenance after physical exertion. This will nourish you." "Physical exertion? All I did was sleep, and you're already torturing my stomach." Valara's smile didn't falter. "It is essential for the survival process. We Zelthari engage in ritualistic feasts to reinforce our bond with our chosen host." I don't think I signed up for a feast," Jack muttered, glancing at the now smoldering kitchen counter. "And I definitely didn't sign up for whatever that is." Ignoring his complaints, Valara scooped a dollop of the glowing goo and offered it to him. Jack hesitated. "Look, I appreciate the effort, but last time I checked, human digestion doesn't work like Zelthari's. It's more about, normal food? Like eggs. Or toast. Or pretty much anything that doesn't glow and look like it's from the alien equivalent of a horror movie." "Toast," she repeated, one of her lower arms raising. "What is toast?" "It's, bread. You heat it up, it gets crispy. Humans love it." "I will toast this bread for you," she said, already turning to the counter. "If it aids your digestion." Jack sighed. At this point, he was almost grateful for the distraction. Watching her struggle with his kitchen equipment was almost as entertaining as it was terrifying. She picked up a piece of bread, placed it under the high-tech burner he hadn't even had a chance to use yet, and stared at it with absolute focus. She turned back to him. "This bread will be toasted. I will use the correct method." "No, you won't," Jack said, shaking his head. "There's a specific." Before he could finish, the bread caught fire. Valara stared at it, unimpressed. "It has achieved the necessary crisping." "Yeah, but not like that." Jack rushed over, pulling the burnt bread out of the machine. That's not toasted. That's a fire hazard." "I have made a mistake," she said, though there was no sign of actual regret. She simply seemed fascinated by the charred bread in her hands, as though she was holding a bizarre artifact. "I have miscalculated the necessary heat exposure." "Miscalculated? That thing's blacker than the inside of a black hole." Jack groaned. "Listen, I love you as a diplomatic partner, but as a chef, you're terrible." "I will study your food more closely in the future," she promised. "Great," Jack muttered. "I'll look forward to that. Let me know when you figure out how not to burn everything I own." She nodded solemnly, before turning back to the bubbling mess on the counter. Jack was half expecting the place to catch fire, but Valara seemed to have an uncanny talent for making disasters look like success. "So, Valara," Jack said as he leaned against the counter, "while you're making breakfast, mind telling me exactly what I'm supposed to do here?" Her tentacles fluttered, what Jack had come to realize were just an extension of her charm. "What do you mean?" "This whole parasite survival thing. I still don't get it. Why exactly did you need to crawl into my bed in the first place? I explained, she said, her tone suddenly serious. The parasite attaches to the host's body, and the resonance of your body heat prevents its multiplication. Only humans can resonate like this. Right, but you could have just told me this earlier, Jack said, rubbing his neck. Instead, you crawled into my bed like some kind of alien. I don't know, ninja. Ninja? She tilted her head, the word clearly unfamiliar. It means you snuck up on me. Without warning. At night. In my bed. She blinked. It is common among Zelthari to initiate survival rituals in a private environment. Yeah, well, it's not common among humans. We, don't usually do this kind of thing. You are uncomfortable. Uncomfortable? You're practically spooning me. I assure you, human, this is not an intimate gesture. It is an act of biological necessity. Jack snorted. Sure, biological necessity. Whatever you say. She seemed undeterred by his skepticism. You humans find comfort in proximity to others. I am merely following the correct protocol to ensure my survival. Okay, Jack said slowly, but if you want to get all survival ritual on me, can we at least get a little more, familiar with human customs first? I am unfamiliar with your species' courting rituals, she said flatly, as though this was the most unimportant detail in the universe. Yeah, and it shows, Jack muttered. How about we just stick to saving your life and not make it weirder than it already is? Agreed. Jack glanced over at the charred bread again. But seriously, if you're going to stay here for the whole resonance thing, could you at least not try to cook? I'm really good at burning things on my own. I don't need your help. Valara blinked, her 4 eyes focusing on him. I will attempt to learn more about your food systems. Yeah, Jack sighed. Let's start with not setting everything on fire. Jack didn't expect his diplomatic mission to involve so much confusion. The Zelthari Council had summoned him and Valara to discuss her survival ritual, but Jack didn't exactly trust this whole situation. He leaned back in his chair, trying to look as nonchalant as possible while Valara stood beside him, still wrapped in an alien shawl that only seemed to accentuate how out of place she looked in the high-tech conference room. So, let me get this straight, Jack said, tapping his fingers against the table. You broke a bunch of Zelthari laws to, what? Sneak into my bed and claim I'm your host? Valara glanced at him, her expression entirely unreadable. Yes. It is a necessary biological function. Without it, I will not survive. The parasite must be kept at bay. The Zelthari Council, a group of tall, slim, multi-eyed figures, were seated across the room. They exchanged looks, clearly puzzled by the situation. One of them, a particularly stern-looking individual with a long, silver beard, spoke up. Valara, your actions have violated the sacred code of our people. The biological survival rituals must be conducted with consent, not through forceful intrusion. His voice was stern, but it lacked the compassion Jack would have expected from a diplomat. Oh, really? Jack shot back, raising an eyebrow. And how exactly was I supposed to consent? You didn't even give me a chance to say no before she crawled into my bed. Valara didn't seem bothered by this. I did ask for your assistance. Yeah, right after wrapping me up like a human burrito, Jack muttered. The council members didn't seem to know how to react. One of them, a younger Zelthari, tilted its head and spoke with what could almost be described as sympathy. Jack Carter, you have misunderstood our species' customs. This is not a romantic gesture, but one of survival. You must understand that. Yeah, well, it sure felt romantic, Jack snapped. You practically put me in a headlock with your tentacles. You misunderstand, Valara interjected calmly. The tentacles were simply a method of ensuring maximum resonance. They are not used for affection. Tell that to my morning breath, Jack muttered. The council seemed more interested in the concept of resonance than Jack's complaints. Another of the Zelthari spoke up, his voice full of confusion. Resonance, you say? Our people are not familiar with such a phenomenon. Are you certain this is necessary? Valara nodded. I have studied human physiology. Only humans can produce the necessary frequency to neutralize the parasite's growth cycle. It is scientific. So, let me get this straight, Jack said, leaning forward. The whole crawling into my bed thing isn't some weird alien flirtation? You're just in it for the parasite-killing magic? Valara stared at him as if the answer was obvious. Yes. I do not desire human companionship. My focus is survival. Right. Survival. Jack glanced at the council. If that's the case, how about we get this parasite thing taken care of so I can get back to my job without having to risk waking up to an alien in my bed every time? The council seemed uneasy. One of them, the bearded one, finally spoke again. We have heard your concerns, human. Perhaps we can reach a solution. Valara, if the survival ritual is truly essential, we may be able to provide alternative methods. I would appreciate that, Jack said quickly, relief washing over him. I'm all for helping the galaxy and all, but I need some boundaries. Just a little bit of space to breathe. Valara tilted her head in confusion. I do not understand. The proximity is necessary for the ritual. How would it work if we were farther apart? Jack shot her a look. You're seriously asking me this after you crawled into my bed? Her bed is yours, the council member said with a glance at Valara, but we will see what alternatives we can find. A long silence followed, as the council members exchanged more quiet glances. Jack was half expecting them to start an entire council debate about alien survival rituals. Instead, one of the younger Zeltharii spoke up. Perhaps we could examine human technology. There are machines in your ship capable of replicating biothermal resonance. We could attempt to create a synthetic version. Jack paused, his eyebrows shooting up. Wait a minute. You mean to tell me I don't have to be your human heater for the next few weeks? That is correct, the young Zeltharii confirmed. It is possible that technology could substitute for your proximity. Jack leaned back in his chair, relieved. Now you're talking. Let's get some real science in here. Valara remained silent, her expression inscrutable. But, Jack continued, a devilish grin creeping onto his face, there's just one thing, you're still going to need some basic human contact, right? I mean, we can't completely get rid of the magic. Valara raised an eyebrow. Human contact? Yeah. You know, like, a handshake. Or a hug. Or maybe just a high five. You are attempting to joke, Valara observed, her voice flat. It is ineffective. I'm not joking, Jack replied with a grin. You're stuck with me, at least until we get the parasite thing sorted. So I guess what's the word? Friends now? You are a survival partner, Valara corrected. Nothing more. Well, that's a start, Jack said, sitting back in his chair. And that's way better than being your personal electric blanket. Valara seemed unfazed by his teasing. If you believe it is better, then I will accept it. But the parasite will still need to be neutralized soon. I'm on it, Jack said, already scanning the room for any kind of escape from the impending awkwardness. But before we figure that out, maybe we can talk about what the rest of your species thinks of human affection. Valara's eyes glinted, and her tentacles twitched in a way that sent an unshakable feeling of dread down Jack's spine. That discussion will come later. First, we solve the parasite problem. Yeah, Jack muttered, parasites first, awkward alien cuddling later. The council gave him a look, clearly unsure how to process his banter, but the older bearded one nodded gravely. Agreed. Let us focus on solutions. As the meeting concluded, Jack couldn't help but feel that somehow, someway, this whole situation had just gotten even stranger. The next few days were a blur of alien tech and awkward attempts at cooperation. Valara insisted on being present for every test, standing at Jack's shoulder with an air of quiet determination. Despite her cool demeanor, Jack could sense a kind of urgency that made him uneasy. The parasite still loomed, invisible but undeniable, hanging over them both. Jack worked through every piece of equipment he could find aboard the ship, hoping one of the human-made devices could replicate the resonance Valara had described. Every time he thought he had something that might work, Valara would patiently explain that it wasn't quite right, her 4 eyes scanning the equipment with the same neutral intensity. It was like trying to teach an alien to dance. They were both fumbling around, but neither of them was willing to admit they had no idea what the other was talking about. One night, after another failed attempt at a resonance device, Jack slumped in front of a holographic blueprint, rubbing his eyes. "This is impossible," he muttered. Valara stood behind him, her long fingers trailing along the ship's console. "I believe the issue lies in the intensity of your body heat. It does not match the optimal frequency." "Yeah, I noticed," Jack replied. "I'm not exactly built like an oven, you know." "You sure your species doesn't have a more subtle way to handle these parasite things?" Valara didn't respond at first. She seemed to be deep in thought, staring at the map of the ship's systems. "There may be an alternative method," she said slowly. "Perhaps, your proximity could be adjusted with a fusion approach." Jack blinked. "A fusion approach? What's that supposed to mean?" "It is a technique where 2 distinct energy sources combine to create a more powerful resonance," she explained. "Your body heat and the ship's energy systems could be fused to create a stronger frequency." Jack rubbed his forehead. "Okay, so now we're mixing my body heat with the ship's power grid. That sounds safe." "You are skeptical, but I believe it could work," she said, her tone almost soothing. "If the resonance can be amplified, the parasite will be neutralized more efficiently." Jack sat back, still unsure. "Look, I'll do anything to get rid of this parasite situation, but I don't want to blow up the ship while we're at it." "I will ensure that the process is controlled," Valara assured him. "We need to synchronize our efforts." The words "synchronize our efforts" echoed in Jack's mind, and he was suddenly very aware of how close they were standing. He shot her a glance, only to find her 4 eyes already fixed on him, waiting for his response. He couldn't decide whether it was the most awkward thing he'd ever experienced or the most intimate. "All right, let's give this fusion thing a shot," Jack said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "But no more crawling into my bed at night, okay? I'm all for saving the galaxy, but I need my personal space." Valara tilted her head. "I do not understand." "I have explained." Yeah. Parasite. Survival. "Whatever," Jack interrupted, holding up a hand. "Just don't make it weird." "I will not make it weird," she replied, her tone matter of fact. Jack couldn't help but let out a snort. "Sure you won't. No more tentacles, no more biothermal resonance at 3 a.m. Let's just get this over with." For the first time, Valara seemed to give him a small smile, though it was more of a subtle acknowledgement than anything. "Agreed. I will start the fusion process. You must be present." Jack nodded. "Lead the way." The ship hummed as they made their way to the central energy core. Jack wasn't sure what exactly to expect, but the sight of the ship's massive energy conduits stretching out in all directions made him feel small. The hum of the power systems was almost comforting, until he realized just how much power was flowing through this place. It was the kind of energy that could power a city, or fry a human in seconds. Valara positioned herself in front of the core, aligning herself with the central conduit. Jack stood a few feet away, just far enough to not be in direct contact with her. The last thing he wanted was to be in the line of fire if this went south. "Ready?" she asked, her voice a bit more serious now. Jack hesitated, but only for a moment. "Let's do this." Valara's hands moved swiftly, pressing certain symbols on the ship's interface. A soft whirring sound filled the room as the energy conduits lit up. Jack felt a slight shiver run through his body as the temperature in the room began to fluctuate, rising and falling in waves. "Is this normal?" Jack asked, trying to hide the unease in his voice. The air felt thick, almost like he was stepping into the heart of a storm. Valara nodded, her eyes glowing faintly. Yes. The energy will align with your frequency. You must remain still, human. Right, Jack said, his fingers twitching at his sides. No problem. Not like I'm about to turn into an electrical rod or anything. Your sarcasm is unnecessary, Valara remarked. Yeah, I know, Jack muttered under his breath. But it helps me not panic. As the energy levels increased, Jack could feel the heat rising, almost as if his body was becoming one with the energy surrounding them. He stood as still as he could, focusing on the task at hand. Then, the sensation hit, a deep hum vibrating through his bones, a low, powerful resonance that seemed to reach into every corner of his being. He gritted his teeth, fighting the urge to flinch, but this time it wasn't the uncomfortable alien touch, it was something else entirely. It was the fusion, the resonance, and for a moment, Jack felt connected not just to Valara but to the entire ship, as if their energies were merging into one. For a split second, it felt almost intimate, a bond that was far beyond what he'd expected. The temperature shifted once more, settling into a stable warmth that didn't feel intrusive but instead, comforting. The parasite, wherever it was, had to be feeling the pressure too. The hum intensified, and Jack could feel it in his chest. How long is this supposed to last? He asked, his voice thick with the vibrations of the resonance. Not long, Valara answered. The parasite's life cycle will be disrupted soon. And just like that, the room fell silent. The resonance dropped to a low, steady hum, and the power levels stabilized. The heat dissipated, and Jack found himself standing, drenched in sweat but unharmed. Well, Jack said, exhaling sharply, I think we did it. Valara turned toward him, her four eyes glowing with what could only be described as satisfaction. It is complete. The parasite has been neutralized. Jack grinned. Well, look at that. You didn't have to crawl into my bed after all. Valara gave him an almost amused look. No. I did not. Good. Because I'm still recovering from the whole alien tentacles in my face incident. Valara's expression softened, just a fraction. I understand, human. You may return to your quarters. Finally, Jack said with a dramatic sigh, wiping his forehead. And no more of that resonance stuff, okay? If it is unnecessary, she said, almost with a note of finality, I will respect your preference. Jack chuckled, already backing out of the room. You've got a deal. And for the first time since he'd met her, Jack felt that maybe, just maybe, he was starting to understand this strange alien.